This is America's day. This is democracy's day, a day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve. Through a crucible for the ages, America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy. The people, the will of the people, has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded.
Well, that's a clip from Joe Biden's inaugural address today. I watched it. I found it fairly, well, I have to say I didn't find it convincing, because the whole time I was thinking he looks like someone who didn't write a speech, barely understands it as he reads it, and will forget it as soon as he's done saying it. I truly believe that Joe Biden is not at the height of his cognitive powers, and that this is something that will actually be used by the Democrats to their advantage. They'll trot out this friendly old man who smiles and reads a few pre-printed lines in a teleprompter. He'll answer few, if any, questions, and he'll be trotted off, while the real work of the Democratic administration is done by other people off screen. So I don't have much to say about the inaugural address, because I don't think it means anything other than what some speechwriters thought. I don't think it truly represents a vision of the president. In fact, those things that did have any meaning seem to me to be a bit of a lie. Talks about unifying America, red and blue, didn't ring true with the extreme divisiveness and the hunting down of Trump with an attempt to impeach him a second time in his final days, and the vetting of soldiers in the National Guard now for political ideology, and just the ratcheting up of the rhetoric in real life, not the ratcheting down. That's my point of view. But look, I'm just a Canadian up here in Toronto. I don't know what's going on. But one of my favorite guys to help us navigate these politics is a Republican who lives in a very Democrat state. You know who I'm talking about, our friend Joel Pollak, senior editor-at-large at Breitbart.com, and we've caught him now on the highways of that very state. Joe, you got to promise me that you'll keep your eyes on the road. I appreciate you talking to us while you're driving, but don't crash, okay?
If I keep my eyes on the road, that'll be an improvement from my normal practice.
Well, that's very funny. Now, I'm sure you watched the inauguration, or at least listened to it on the radio as you were driving. I'm not going to pay a lot of attention to it, because I don't think it reflects the president. Am I wrong?
Well, let me give you my assessment of the speech as a speech, first of all. I thought it was a very good speech, and I think it was probably the best speech Joe Biden has given that I can remember. There were some weak points and very concerning things in the speech that I'll get to in a moment, but let's just talk about the good, first of all. I think it's good that he talked about unity, and he didn't just talk about it as a line or two. It really was the entire speech, and I think that's important. I think he has a lot to do to unify the country. He ran a very divisive campaign. His party is busy trying to punish Trump out of office, post-presidency. And, of course, there was the Capitol riot 2 weeks ago. So given the setting and given the context, I think the speech was very good in terms of its focus on unity. I think he had some very good lines. We must end this uncivil war. I think that was the line of the speech. And I think that'll be remembered. I think that he'll be remembered for that. I think that's the way he wants to be thought of as a president. And I think he did himself a really good turn by making unity the focus of the speech. Now, the negative part of the speech was a section about truth. And Joe Biden has promoted this conceit that somehow he represents truth and the opposition represents lies. And he went after what he called lies for power and for profit. I'm paraphrasing slightly. It may have been the other way around, lies for profit and for power. But first of all, it's not true that other people lie and Joe Biden tells the truth. I mean, Joe Biden is one of the most notorious liars in the history of American politics. He dropped out of his first presidential race because he faked his resume and he plagiarized the speech. He also campaigned on the Fine People hoax and many other lies. He continues to lie. A couple weeks ago, he lied about the president holding a Bible upside down. I mean, Joe Biden can't tell the truth. But aside from the hypocrisy, it was a subtle endorsement of the cancel culture. The idea that these social media platforms are going to try to get rid of users and groups that hold alternative views that the left considers untrue. But on issue after issue, like climate change, for example, you're going to find that what the left considers untrue is simply skepticism or an alternative view that might actually turn out to be correct. So I was very concerned about Joe Biden's line or paragraph about going after lies and pursuing lies. He didn't specify what he would do. He said we have a responsibility to tell the truth. Well, that's fine. But he did not emphasize free speech, and that was a big problem. In Trump's farewell address yesterday, he spoke about the importance of free speech. It would not have been difficult for Joe Biden to do the same. He didn't really do that. So I think that's very concerning. That's why, if you look at the Breitbart headlines today, they're all about how Joe Biden called for unity and then demonized his opponent. I think that's perhaps a less charitable reading than the one I just gave, but it's not untrue. I mean, I think that is actually pretty accurate. After making this great call for unity, he signaled that there's going to be a kind of intolerance for views that he considers to be untrue. And that's where the fight is right now. So that's why there's division, because Democrats insist they have a monopoly on truth. And of course they don't. Many of the things they believe are simply false, and they think they're true because they live in a media echo chamber that doesn't encounter an alternative perspective. So that was what was bad in the speech. The other noteworthy thing about the speech is that it had no policy in it whatsoever. This is one of the few inaugural addresses that I can remember, it may be the only one in recent memory, that had no declarations of policy or even policy goals, really. It was just completely bereft of any kind of policy. And that might have been fine, given the context. Maybe we don't want to talk about policy when the country is trying to come together. That's the most important priority. But there are going to be some big policy moves. There already are some underway on his first day in office. So it was kind of interesting that he didn't signal a policy direction the way Obama did, for example, and the way Trump certainly did in his inaugural address. So I don't think it was a remarkable address on its own. I don't think it was particularly well written, but it was a very good speech in that it emphasized unity. And I do think Joe Biden believes in it. I'm not sure he knows how to do it. And his party is busy making everything worse with this continued impeachment and so forth, and the pursuit of dissident views, the attempt to stifle free speech online that he's kind of endorsed. In fact, it's more than kind of. He actually has endorsed it. His campaign pushed Facebook to get conservatives offline and that sort of thing. So I think it remains to be seen if Joe Biden can follow through on that commitment for unity. But it wasn't a bad start. And one other thing I'm just reminded of, he asked the nation to join in a moment of silence or a public prayer over the victims of coronavirus. Now, I'm not so sold on the idea of public mourning for the victims of coronavirus in quite the way that Democrats want us to do it. It's almost as if they want us to be continually mournful. Joe Biden talked about, I think he called it a dismal winter or something like that. I'm not into that. I do think people need to be remembered and honored and so forth, and there need to be memorials, but it can't be a constant memorial. We can't walk around under a dark cloud. But I do think it's important that he said his first act as president would be to offer a prayer. That's really a social conservative thing to do. And so if there's any hope that he can follow through on this promise of unity, it was in that gesture. So I would grade the speech as very good. I don't know if it means anything for the future of his presidency. In fact, I said earlier today that this will probably be the best day of Joe Biden's presidency because it was the one thing he was supposed to do, right? Was supposed to win the election and take Donald Trump out of the picture. So he's done that now, and I don't think there's much left for him to do. But I think it's a good start, a better start than I anticipated.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.